Welcome to a new video. My name is Myra Cagete. Today I'm going to talk about the basic usage of will and would. There will be a quiz at the end of the video, so listen carefully. Ang will at would ay mga halimbawa ng modal auxiliary verbs or simply modal verbs. Ano-ano nga ba yung mga modal verbs in English? Andyan yung can, could, shall, should, must, ought to, may, might, at yun ngang will and would. Ang mga modal auxiliary verbs or simply modal verbs ay ginagamit lamang na pantulong dun sa ating main verb sa ating sentences para i-express or ipahayag yung kakayahan, posibilidad, o kaya intensyon. So, modal auxiliary verbs combine with other verbs to express necessity, possibility, intention, or ability. Kung napapansin ninyo, nag-iiba yung ibig sabihin ng sentence depende doon sa modal auxiliary verb na gagamitin ninyo. For example, sa isang sentence, ginamit ninyo yung will, tapos sa isa namang sentence, ginamit ninyo yung can, then of course, magiging magkaiba na ang ibig sabihin ng dalawang sentences na yan. Now, let's talk about will and would. Mag-umpisa muna ako dun sa basic usage nila, pagkatapos, i-explain ko naman yung differences ng dalawang modal verbs na yan. Let's start with will. Will is used for talking about voluntary actions that happen in the future or for talking about things that we are willing to do in the future. Kaya nga will, di ba? We are willing to do this and we are willing to do this in the future. Ito nga yung pinaka-basic usage ng will, di ba? Automatically, pag nakarinig ka ng will, ibig sabihin, pinag-uusapan natin yung future. So we're talking about future actions. For example, I will go to the party with you. So, I will go. Will yung ating modal verb, tapos yung main verb ay go. Will go. My dad will buy a new car for me. My dad will buy. So, will yung modal verb, tapos yung main verb ay buy. So, when you say, my father will buy a new car for me, ibig sabihin, ang tatay mo ay voluntaryong bibili ng kotse para sa'yo.
Sometimes, we just contract or shorten it when the subject is a pronoun. I will, I'll, you will, you'll, he will, he'll, she will, she'll, it will, it'll, we will, we'll, they will, they'll.
Kapag ang sentence naman ay nasa negative form, of course, all you have to do is to put not after will. Will not buy. My dad will not buy a new car for me. So, will not buy. Yung contracted form naman yan or yung shortened form, yung pinaiksing form ay won't. Pwedeng will not o kaya naman won't. My dad won't buy a new car for me.
Kapag nasa question form naman ang inyong sentences, sundan niyo lang ang mga structures na ito. Will plus the subject plus a verb in its base form.
For example, will my dad buy a new car for me?
O kaya kapag nasa negative form naman ang inyong question, sundan niyo lang ito. Will plus the subject plus not plus a verb in its base form.
For example, will my dad not buy a new car for me?
Pwede nyo ring i-contract or i-shorten yung will not. Won't plus the subject plus a verb in its base form.
For example, won't my dad buy a new car for me? So yun, will is used for talking about voluntary actions or things that we are willing to do in the future. Will can also be used when we're talking about promises. For example, just call my name and I'll be there. So I'll is the contraction of I will. So just call my name and I will be there. Or just call my name and I'll be there. Don't worry, I will be on time tomorrow. Or don't worry, I'll be on time tomorrow. I will not do it again. Or I won't do it again. Will you still love me tomorrow? I promise I will still love you tomorrow. Will is also used when we make predictions about the future. So, ang will ay ginagamit din kapag tayo ay nanghuhula or kapag hinuhulaan natin kung ano yung mangyayari sa kinabukasan or sa hinaharap. For example, the weather forecast says it will rain tomorrow, or the weather forecast says it'll rain tomorrow. Ito ay prediction lang, okay? Ito ay hindi 100% na mangyayari kasi hindi naman tayo ang Diyos para mag-decide kung ano mangyayari tomorrow or sa hinaharap, but this is just a prediction. Another example, Rob will probably get a salary increase after this big success. Will, tapos pwede yung isingit yung word na probably because that's used for talking about uncertainty. Tapos, get. So, will get. Rob will probably get a salary increase after this big success. So, it's just a prediction. Yan yung mga karaniwang paggamit ng will. Of course, you use will for talking about voluntary actions that happen in the future or yung mga bagay na gusto nating gawin sa future. O kaya naman when we talk about promises, na of course ay gagawin sa kinabukasan or sa hinaharap. At yun namang predictions. Now, let's talk about would. Would is the past form of will. So we use would to talk about things that people voluntarily wanted to do in the past, or for talking about things that people were willing to do in the past. For example, I heard that my dad would buy a new car for me. So I heard in the past, narinig ko na yung tatay ko ay bibili ng kotse para sa akin. So I heard that my dad would buy a new car for me. Would, tapos buy.
Sometimes we just contract or shorten it when the subject is a pronoun. I would, I'd, you would, you'd, he would, he'd, she would, she'd, it would, it'd, we would, we'd, they would, they'd.
Kapag ang sentence nyo naman ay nasa negative form, then all you have to do is to put not after would. So you say, my father would not buy. Or you can contract would not, and then you can say wouldn't. My father wouldn't buy. I heard that my dad would not buy a new car for me. Or I heard that my dad wouldn't buy a new car for me.
Kapag gagamitin mo naman ang would sa questions, sundan lamang ang structures na ito. Would plus the subject plus a verb in its base form. Example, would you buy a new car for me? Kapag nasa negative structure naman ang iyong question, would plus the subject plus not plus a verb in its base form. Example, would you not buy a new car for me? Or, wouldn't plus the subject plus a verb in its base form. Wouldn't you buy a new car for me?
Of course, we can also use would for predictions, but here we're talking about predictions in the past. For example, I knew you would do that. O kaya naman, I knew you would not agree with me. Or, I knew you wouldn't agree with me. At syempre, pwede rin natin gamitin ang would for talking about promises. But we're talking about past promises here. For example, he promised that he would always be there. So, would, tapos, be. He promised that he would be there. We also often use would when we talk about reported speech. I'm not sure kung lahat ba kayo ay napag-aralan na yung reported speech before, but when we report a past conversation or a past statement, we use would. So kapag ipinapahayag natin, kapag sinasabi natin kung ano yung sinabi ng ibang tao or kung ano yung sinabi natin in the past, we use would. Halimbawa, chismosa ka. Okay, chismosa ka, kunwari lang, okay? Tapos, nakikinig ka sa usapan ng mga kapitbahay mo na mag-asawa. Okay, let's say pinag-uusapan nila yung darating na birthday ng anak nilang lalaki. So, narinig mo yung usapan nila or nakikinig ka talaga sa usapan nila. Ngayon, ang sabi ng babaeng asawa, I will buy lechon for our son's birthday. So, yun yung exact statement ng asawang babae. I will buy lechon for our son's birthday. Will buy. Ngayon, yung statement na yon ay i-report mo or sasabihin mo sa isa pang kumari mo na marites din. So, ang sasabihin mo, she said, past yun, okay? She said she would buy lechon for their son's birthday. So, she would buy. Kasi nga, yun yung reported speech. So, nireport mo na kung ano yung sinabi ng kapitbahay mong babae na bibili ng lechon. Okay? At ipinasa mo siya sa isa pang tao. Okay? So, ibig sabihin, sinasabi mo kung ano yung sinabi nung isa. Kung ano yung gagawin niya in the future. Pero narinig mo siya in the past. So, kapag i-report mo na siya, at sa usapan ninyo ngayon, ang sasabihin mo, she said she would buy lechon for their son's birthday. Pay attention dun sa unang verb na ginamit ko sa sentence, okay? She said, so it's in the past. At syempre, dun sa pangalawang verb na gagamitin ninyo, kailangan nasa past form din. So, she said that she would buy. So, that's an example of a reported speech. Sinasabi mo kung ano yung sinabi ng ibang tao. And in this case, yung sinabi niya ay kung ano yung mangyayari in the future. At dun sa reported speech mo, ang gagamitin mo instead of will ay would. We also use would for repeated actions in the past. So, ginagamit natin yung would kapag ang sinasabi natin ay yung mga bagay na paulit-ulit nating ginagawa dati. For example, when I was a kid, I would always play 10-20 with my cousins. Hindi ko alam kung familiar kayo sa 10-20. Okay, 10-20, 30, 40. But I'm sure if you're a batang 90s, alam ko na familiar ka dyan. So siguro yung mga kabataan ngayon na hindi na alam ang 10-20. But anyway, when I was a kid, I would always play 10-20 with my cousins. Would, tapos yung main verb ay play. Kasi yan yung paulit-ulit kong ginawa when I was a kid. Another example, when my father was still alive, he would always listen to classic love songs every Sunday. So, when my father was still alive, ito yung paulit-ulit niyang ginagawa every Sunday. He would always listen to classic love songs every Sunday. So, ito ay habitual action. Nakalimutan ko na kung anong radio station yun. Basta every Sunday, nagpapatugtog sila ng mga classic love songs. Alam mo yung mga Boulevard, Love Story, ano pa ba, Put Your Head on My Shoulder, yung mga ganyan. Naalala ko tuloy tatay ko.
Will and would for making requests.
Both will and would can be used when we make requests in English. So kapag tayo ay humihingi ng pabor o kaya yun nga, nagre-request tayo sa ibang tao, we can use will o kaya naman would. For example, will you send the form to me please? Or would you send the form to me please? Parehong pwedeng gamitin yung will at would when you make requests in English. Ngayon, ano yung pagkakaiba nilang dalawa? Simple lang, ang would ay more polite and less direct compared to will. This is when we make requests, okay? Mas magalang o kaya hindi masyadong direct yung tunog kapag ginamit mo yung would compared sa will. I suggest that when you're talking to a boss, for example, or to a superior, just use would because it's more polite and less direct.
Let me just recap what I've just discussed. Ito ay ang mga karaniwang paggamit ng will at would. Will can be used when we talk about voluntary actions in the future. It can be used when we talk about promises and predictions. It can also be used when we make requests in English. Ang would naman ay ang past form ng will. It can be used when we talk about voluntary actions in the past. It can be used when we talk about promises or predictions in the past. Would could be used in reported speech or when we talk about repeated actions in the past. Of course, we can also use it when we make requests in English, and it's more polite compared to will.
Now let's start the quiz.
Number 1. My high school teacher thought I achieve anything in life. Will not or would not. The correct answer is would not. Number 2. You please be quiet. Will or would? Both will and would could be used, but would is a little bit more polite than will. Number 3. Nobody knew that one day he be rich. Will or would? The answer is would. Number 4. Promise me you tell them. won't, or wouldn't? The right answer is won't. Number 5. The professor said that the deadline for the submission of the project on Monday will be or would be. The answer is would be.
Did you get a perfect score? Congratulations if you did. Thank you very much for joining me today. I'll see you again next time.